There are people in your life right now who are not who they appear to be. That may sound unsettling, but before you dismiss it, think about this. How many times have you looked back on a relationship, a friendship, or even a conversation and thought, the signs were there, I just didn't see them? At the time, everything felt normal. The person seemed kind, trustworthy, maybe even unusually attentive. They listened when others didn't. They remembered details. They made you feel understood. Looking back, what seemed like genuine interest may have been something else entirely. Not always, but sometimes. There is an important difference between paranoia and pattern recognition. Paranoia sees danger everywhere. Pattern recognition sees danger where patterns exist. The goal of this audiobook is not to make you suspicious of every person you meet. It is not to convince you that everyone has hidden motives or that trust is a mistake. The goal is much simpler than that. The goal is to help you see clearly, because some of the most damaging people you'll ever encounter do not look dangerous at all. When most people hear the word predator, they picture someone obvious, someone aggressive, someone who leaves destruction wherever they go, someone everyone around them can easily identify. Real life is rarely that simple. Many predators blend into everyday life so well that nobody notices them. They can be the charming coworker who always seems to know exactly what to say. They can be the friend who becomes deeply involved in your life very quickly. They can be the romantic partner who makes you feel like you've finally met someone who truly understands you. That is what makes them difficult to spot. Their greatest weapon is not intimidation, it is trust. Think about it. If someone walked up to you and announced that they intended to manipulate you, you would walk away immediately. If someone openly admitted they wanted control over your emotions, your decisions, or your loyalty, you would never let them get close, so they don't. Instead, they earn access. They observe carefully. They listen more than they speak. They pay attention to things most people overlook. Within a surprisingly short amount of time, they begin building a picture of who you are. What makes you happy? What makes you insecure? What do you complain about? Who do you trust? What are you hoping for? Which compliments make you smile? Which fears keep you awake at night? Most people never realize how much information they reveal in ordinary conversation. A casual comment about a difficult relationship, a joke about a personal insecurity, a complaint about work, a story about feeling lonely. To most people, these are simply conversations. To a skilled manipulator, they can be clues. Imagine meeting someone who seems almost too good to be true. They agree with you on everything. They share your interests. They understand your frustrations. Every conversation feels easy. Every interaction leaves you feeling better than before. You tell yourself you've simply met someone special. Months later, you realize they knew exactly what they were doing from the very beginning. Not because they were smarter than you, not because you were weak, but because they were studying patterns while you were building trust. One of the biggest misconceptions about manipulation is the belief that only weak people become victims. Nothing could be further from the truth. Intelligent people get manipulated. Successful people get manipulated. Confident people get manipulated. Kind people get manipulated. In fact, some of the qualities we admire most in ourselves can sometimes make us more vulnerable. Empathy, patience, loyalty, optimism, the willingness to give people a second chance. These are not weaknesses, they are strengths. The problem is that strengths can be exploited when they are not balanced with awareness. Have you ever ignored a small red flag because you didn't want to seem judgmental? Have you ever explained away behavior that made you uncomfortable? Have you ever had a gut feeling about someone only to talk yourself out of it moments later? Most people have. The reason is simple. We want to believe the best in others. There is something admirable about that. The world would be a much colder place without it. But there is also a cost, because while most people are approaching relationships with honesty, not everyone is playing by the same rules. If you've ever walked away from a conversation with a strange feeling you couldn't explain, if you've ever ignored a warning sign because you wanted to believe someone had good intentions, or if you've ever looked back on a relationship and wondered how you missed what now seems obvious, then this audiobook is for you. Chapter 1. The Predator Mindset. How they choose their targets. Predators do not look for weak people. They look for available people. That statement surprises many people because it challenges one of the most common assumptions about manipulation. When we hear stories about controlling partners, toxic friendships, workplace exploitation, or emotional abuse, we often imagine that the victims must have been unusually vulnerable. We picture someone lacking confidence, someone who ignored obvious warning signs, or someone who simply did not know any better. Reality is rarely that simple. Many people who find themselves trapped in manipulative relationships are intelligent, capable, and successful. They are often the people others admire. They manage businesses, raise families, maintain careers, and navigate complex responsibilities every day. Some are highly educated. Others are naturally confident and independent. Yet despite these strengths, they still become targets. The reason is that manipulation is not primarily about finding weakness. It is about finding opportunity. Imagine two houses on the same street. One is large and impressive, while the other is modest and unremarkable. A thief is unlikely to choose between them based solely on appearance. Instead, they will look for something much more practical. Which door is unlocked? Which window has been left open? Which property offers the easiest access? Human relationships can operate in a surprisingly similar way. Manipulative individuals are often less interested in overpowering people than they are in gaining access to them. They want access to your trust, your emotions, your time, your energy, and your attention. Once those doors have been opened, influence becomes far easier than force. This is one of the reasons manipulation can be so difficult to recognize. Most people expect danger to announce itself. They expect pressure, aggression, or obvious attempts at control. In reality, the process often begins with something much quieter. It begins with trust. Trust is one of the most valuable things human beings can offer one another. Healthy relationships depend on it. Friendships grow because of it. Families remain connected because of it. Yet trust also requires vulnerability. Every time you trust someone, you give them access to parts of your life that remain hidden from everyone else. Most people approach that responsibility with care. Not everyone does. To understand how predators operate, it helps to understand how differently they often view relationships. When you meet someone new, you are probably trying to determine whether you enjoy their company. You may be asking yourself whether they seem honest, whether you share common interests, or whether they fit naturally into your life. A manipulator may be evaluating the situation through a completely different lens. Rather than asking, "Do I like this person?" they may be asking, "What does this person need?" Instead of wondering whether a friendship will develop naturally, they may be observing what motivates you, what worries you, and what influences your decisions. The more they understand those things, the easier it becomes to predict your behavior. And prediction is powerful. When someone can predict how you will respond, they can often influence your choices without appearing to do so. That process rarely happens overnight. In fact, one of the greatest misconceptions about manipulation is the belief that it begins with dramatic events. Most of the time, it does not. It develops gradually through a series of small interactions that appear harmless when viewed individually. To see how this works, consider the story of Sarah. Sarah worked for a growing marketing company and had built a reputation as someone people could depend on. She was organized, hardworking, and always willing to help a colleague who needed assistance. Her managers appreciated her reliability, and her co-workers knew they could count on her when deadlines became stressful. When a new employee named Daniel joined the company, he immediately made a positive impression. He was friendly without being overly familiar. He remembered people's names after meeting them once. He asked thoughtful questions during meetings and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know the team. At first, Sarah enjoyed working with him. A few weeks after he started, Daniel stopped by her desk late one afternoon, carrying a folder of documents. He looked slightly overwhelmed and asked if she would mind reviewing a proposal before he submitted it. The request seemed reasonable, and the task only took a few minutes. Sarah was happy to help. A few days later, Daniel needed another favor. This time, it involved proofreading a presentation. Not long after that, he asked for help preparing materials for an upcoming meeting. Again, none of these requests seemed unusual. Daniel was polite. He always expressed gratitude. He regularly complimented Sarah's professionalism and often told others how fortunate the company was to have someone so dependable. Months passed and the pattern continued. What Sarah failed to notice at first was that the requests were becoming more frequent. Tasks that should have been Daniel's responsibility slowly began finding their way onto her desk. Whenever he encountered a problem, he turned to her. Whenever a deadline approached, he relied on her support. No single request felt unreasonable. That was precisely why the pattern remained invisible for so long. Eventually, Sarah found herself staying late to complete work that was never supposed to be hers. She felt exhausted, frustrated, and increasingly overwhelmed. Yet every time she considered refusing, she experienced a familiar feeling: guilt. Daniel had learned something important about her. He had learned that Sarah valued being helpful. He had learned that disappointing people made her uncomfortable. Most importantly, he had learned that she was willing to place other people's needs ahead of her own for far longer than most individuals would. Whether Daniel consciously recognized what he was doing is almost irrelevant. The outcome remained the same. He identified an opening and repeatedly benefited from it. That is how many manipulative dynamics begin. Not with cruelty, not with threats, not with obvious deception. They begin with observation. Manipulative individuals tend to pay close attention to qualities that many people view as strengths. Empathy is one of them. Empathetic people naturally try to understand what others are experiencing. They are willing to listen, willing to help, and willing to offer second chances. These qualities make them wonderful friends, partners, and family members. They can also make them vulnerable when paired with poor boundaries. The same is true of kindness. Kind people generally prefer understanding over conflict. They often assume good intentions and give others the benefit of the doubt. Reliability creates a similar dynamic. Reliable people keep their promises, honor their commitments, and take responsibility seriously. None of these qualities are weaknesses. In fact, they are some of the most admirable traits a person can possess. The problem arises when these strengths operate without limits. Empathy without boundaries can become self-sacrifice. Kindness without boundaries can become compliance. Reliability without boundaries can become obligation. Another characteristic that often attracts manipulative individuals is the desire for approval. Most people enjoy being liked. There is nothing unusual about that. Human beings are social creatures, and acceptance has always mattered to us. Problems begin when the desire to be liked becomes stronger than the willingness to protect oneself. People who constantly seek approval often ignore discomfort because they fear disappointing others. They tolerate behavior that feels wrong because they do not want to appear rude. They remain silent when boundaries are crossed because confrontation feels more painful than compliance. Manipulators notice these patterns, not because they possess extraordinary abilities, but because human behavior is remarkably consistent. The encouraging news is that awareness changes everything. The moment you begin recognizing your own patterns, you become significantly more difficult to manipulate. The qualities that once made you vulnerable become strengths again because they are supported by awareness and boundaries. But understanding yourself is only part of the equation. If predators rely so heavily on information, how do they gather it in the first place? How do they learn what motivates you, what worries you, what excites you, and what influences your decisions? Because before someone can manipulate you, they must first understand you. And that understanding usually begins long before you realize you are being studied. Chapter 2. The 5 Signs Someone is Studying You. Most people assume they can tell when someone is interested in them. It seems like a simple thing to recognize. Someone asks questions, listens carefully, remembers details, and wants to spend time with you. These are all normal signs of curiosity and connection. In healthy relationships, this is exactly how trust begins. Two people gradually learn about one another, and over time, a bond develops. The challenge is that genuine interest and strategic interest can look remarkably similar in the beginning. That is what makes manipulation so difficult to detect. Most people are not expecting to be studied. They assume conversations are simply conversations. They assume questions are being asked because someone wants to know them better, and very often that assumption is correct. But not always. Some individuals approach conversations differently. They are not just listening to what you say. They are paying attention to what your answers reveal. They are collecting information, identifying patterns, and building a picture of who you are. The more complete that picture becomes, the easier it is to predict how you might respond in future situations. One of the first signs of this process is surprisingly easy to overlook. A healthy conversation usually involves a natural exchange. Both people share stories. Both people reveal personal experiences. Both people gradually contribute pieces of themselves. There is a balance that develops naturally. When someone is studying you, however, that balance often disappears. You may find yourself talking for long periods while learning very little about the other person. They ask thoughtful questions. They encourage you to elaborate. They seem fascinated by your experiences. Yet, whenever the conversation shifts toward them, their answers tend to remain brief before the focus quietly returns to you. At first, this can feel flattering. Who doesn't enjoy feeling heard? Imagine meeting someone who seems genuinely interested in your life. They ask about your childhood, your family, your ambitions, your struggles, and your dreams for the future. After spending several hours with them, you leave feeling understood. You may even feel unusually connected to them. Then, days later, a strange realization occurs. You know their favorite questions. You know their reactions. You know how they made you feel. But you know very little about who they actually are. That imbalance does not automatically mean someone has bad intentions. Some people are naturally curious, while others are simply private. The important thing is not to jump to conclusions. The important thing is to notice patterns. Healthy relationships involve mutual disclosure. Trust grows when both people gradually reveal themselves. If one person consistently gathers information while offering very little in return, it is worth paying attention to that dynamic. Another common sign is something many people mistake for compatibility. They seem to agree with everything you say. At first, this feels wonderful. Human beings naturally gravitate toward people who appear similar to them. Shared opinions create comfort. Shared values create familiarity. Shared experiences create connection. It is reassuring to feel understood by another person. Manipulative individuals understand this instinct very well. Imagine meeting someone who appears to share all of your interests. They love the same books, they enjoy the same hobbies, they share your views on relationships, work, family, and life. Every conversation reinforces the feeling that you've found someone remarkably compatible. For a while, it may seem almost too good to be true. Then one day you notice something unusual. When they are with one group of people, they agree with those people. When they are with another group, they agree with them too. Their opinions seem flexible. Their beliefs shift depending on the audience. What originally felt like compatibility begins to look more like adaptation. The goal is not always honesty. Sometimes the goal is acceptance. This is why complete agreement should not always be viewed as a positive sign. Genuine relationships include differences. Real people disagree occasionally. They have independent thoughts, perspectives, and preferences. When someone constantly mirrors your beliefs without ever revealing a meaningful difference of opinion, it may be worth asking yourself whether you are seeing the real person or simply a reflection of yourself. A third sign often feels like a compliment. They remember unusual details. Most of us appreciate being remembered. It feels good when someone recalls a story we told months ago or asks about something important in our lives. In healthy relationships, this can be a sign of care and attentiveness. The difference lies in the details that are remembered. Imagine mentioning an insecurity during a casual conversation. Perhaps you briefly discuss a fear of failure, a painful breakup, or a difficult relationship with a family member. The conversation moves on, and eventually you forget all about it. Months later, that person brings it up. Not the general topic, the specific detail, the exact concern, the exact emotional reaction. Suddenly you realize they remembered something you barely remembered sharing. Again, this does not automatically indicate manipulation. Some people genuinely pay close attention to others. The question is, what information seems to matter most to them? Manipulative individuals often focus on details that reveal vulnerabilities. They remember insecurities, fears, unmet needs, and emotional wounds, because those details help them understand what motivates you. They learn what makes you feel valued, what makes you feel guilty, and what makes you seek reassurance. Information like that can become extremely useful. One of the most revealing questions you can ask yourself is this: what kinds of details does this person consistently remember? The answer may tell you more about them than you realize. The fourth sign is one of the most important because it often appears long before any obvious manipulation takes place. They test small boundaries. Many people imagine that unhealthy relationships begin with major violations. They picture dramatic arguments, obvious control, or clear disrespect. More often, the process begins with something much smaller: a request, a favor, an inconvenience, a tiny exception, something easy to excuse. Perhaps someone repeatedly arrives late and expects you to wait. Perhaps they borrow things without asking. Perhaps they pressure you into changing plans, staying longer than you intended, or helping them when it is inconvenient for you. Individually, these moments seem insignificant. Together, they form a pattern. Every time a boundary is tested, information is gathered. The person learns what you will tolerate, what makes you uncomfortable, and how likely you are to push back. This is why many victims later look back and remember a moment that felt wrong from the beginning. The problem was never the single incident. The problem was what the incident revealed. Healthy people respect boundaries even when they do not like them. They understand that other people have limits, preferences, and responsibilities. Manipulative individuals often view boundaries differently. To them, boundaries are obstacles, something to negotiate, challenge, pressure, or slowly wear down over time. One of the clearest indicators of character is not how someone behaves when you say yes. It is how they behave when you say no. The fifth and perhaps most revealing sign becomes visible only with time. They seem to become different people depending on who they are with. To be clear, everyone adapts to different environments. You probably speak differently with friends than you do in a professional meeting. That is normal social behavior. The issue is not adaptation. The issue is inconsistency. Consider someone who appears warm, supportive, and humble when they are alone with you. Then you see them in another setting and encounter a completely different version of the same person. Around certain people, they become arrogant. Around others, they become submissive. In one group, they appear generous, while in another, they are dismissive and cruel. Over time, you begin to wonder which version is genuine. A woman once described this experience after the end of a long relationship. She said the most confusing part was not the arguments or disappointments. The most confusing part was realizing that she had spent years getting to know several different versions of the same person. Around her family, he behaved one way. Around friends, another. Around co-workers, another. And around her, another still. Each version seemed authentic in the moment, yet when viewed together, they created a troubling picture. Authentic people may adjust their behavior to suit different situations, but their values remain relatively consistent. Manipulative individuals often shape themselves according to whatever version is most useful in the moment. Their goal is not necessarily self-expression. Their goal is influence. That is why observing someone across multiple situations can be incredibly revealing. Watch how they treat people who have nothing to offer them. Notice how they behave when there is no audience to impress. Pay attention to how they speak about people who are absent. Character becomes easier to recognize when there is nothing to gain. At this point, it is important to remember that none of these signs should be viewed in isolation. A curious person is not automatically manipulative. A person with a strong memory is not automatically dangerous. Someone who agrees with you is not automatically dishonest. The real lesson lies in the pattern. Manipulation rarely announces itself through one dramatic event. It reveals itself through repeated behavior, small inconsistencies, and subtle habits that become visible over time. Looking back, many people can identify the moment they first felt something was off. A conversation, a comment, a request, a reaction. The feeling was there, the significance was not. By the time the pattern becomes obvious, the manipulator has often already learned a great deal. They understand your fears, your insecurities, your desires, and your emotional needs. They know what motivates you and what makes you hesitate. And once someone possesses that knowledge, the next step becomes much easier. Because information is never the final goal. Information is simply the foundation. What comes next is how that information is used. Chapter 3. Love Bombing. When attention becomes a warning sign. Most people believe manipulation begins with cruelty. They imagine criticism, control, intimidation, or emotional pressure. They picture someone slowly becoming more demanding, more aggressive, or more obvious over time. But that is not how many manipulative relationships begin. In fact, some of the most damaging relationships start with the exact opposite. They start with attention. They start with admiration. They start with feeling special. If you've ever looked back on a relationship and wondered how things changed so dramatically, this chapter may provide an answer, because manipulation often enters through a door that few people think to guard. The desire to feel valued. There is nothing unusual about wanting attention from people we care about. Human beings are wired for connection. We want to feel understood, appreciated, and accepted. When someone makes us feel important, we naturally enjoy being around them. That is why love bombing can be so effective. At its core, love bombing is not simply affection. It is accelerated affection. It is attention delivered with unusual intensity and unusual speed. And while genuine relationships grow over time, Love bombing often attempts to create emotional closeness before trust has had a chance to develop naturally. Imagine meeting someone new. The first conversations are effortless. They seem fascinated by everything you say. They text you throughout the day. They remember details from earlier conversations. They tell you how refreshing you are, how different you are, how connected they feel to you. At first, it feels exciting. Who wouldn't enjoy that? Most people spend years hoping to meet someone who understands them. When it finally appears to happen, questioning it can feel almost ungrateful. That is one of the reasons love bombing works so well. It gives people something they genuinely want. Consider the experience of a woman named Emily. Emily met a man at a friend's birthday party. Their conversation lasted less than an hour, but by the end of the evening, she felt as though she had known him much longer. The next morning, he sent her a message, then another later that evening. Over the following weeks, the attention continued. He told her she was unlike anyone he had ever met. He spoke about their connection as though it were something rare and extraordinary. He wanted to see her constantly. He called whenever he had a free moment. He sent thoughtful messages throughout the day. To Emily, it felt romantic. Her friends described him as attentive. Her family thought he seemed devoted, and for a while, she agreed. The relationship moved quickly. Conversations that normally take months happened within weeks. Future plans were discussed almost immediately. Emotional intimacy developed at a pace that felt exciting rather than alarming. Looking back, Emily would later identify something she missed at the time. Everything felt rushed. Not rushed in an obvious way, rushed in a way that felt flattering. That distinction matters. Healthy relationships tend to unfold naturally. Trust develops through shared experiences. Affection grows as two people gradually learn who the other person is. Love bombing attempts to bypass that process. Instead of allowing trust to grow, it creates the feeling of trust before it has been earned. The danger is not the affection itself. The danger is what the affection is trying to accomplish. For some manipulators, overwhelming attention serves a purpose. It creates emotional dependency. When someone becomes accustomed to constant validation, constant communication, and constant reassurance, the sudden absence of those things can feel deeply unsettling. That is where the dynamic often begins to change. The person who once seemed endlessly available becomes less consistent. The messages become less frequent. The attention begins to fluctuate. The warmth that felt so effortless in the beginning suddenly feels conditional. Without realizing it, many people find themselves working to regain what they once received freely. This is one of the most powerful psychological shifts that can occur in a relationship. At the beginning, affection is abundant. Later, affection becomes something to earn, and once that happens, the balance of power starts to change. Of course, not every intense relationship is manipulative. This is important to remember. Some people genuinely become excited when they meet someone they care about. Some relationships develop quickly and remain healthy for years. The difference is not speed alone. The difference is whether the connection continues to deepen in a healthy way or whether the intensity is being used to create dependence. Healthy affection allows room for individuality. Manipulative affection often demands increasing emotional investment. Healthy affection respects boundaries. Manipulative affection views boundaries as obstacles. Healthy affection remains relatively consistent. Manipulative affection often swings between abundance and scarcity. One of the simplest questions you can ask yourself is this: if the attention disappeared tomorrow, what would remain? Would there still be trust? Would there still be respect? Would there still be genuine knowledge of one another? Or has the relationship been built primarily on emotional intensity? That question can reveal a great deal. Love bombing is not limited to romantic relationships either. It can appear in friendships, It can appear in workplaces. It can appear in mentorships. A new friend may immediately treat you like their closest confidant. A colleague may praise you excessively before asking for favors. A mentor may create a sense of exclusivity by convincing you that they alone truly understand your potential. The pattern remains surprisingly similar. Excessive attention, rapid closeness, accelerated trust, increasing influence. This is why understanding your emotional needs is so important. Every person has vulnerabilities. Some people long to feel appreciated. Some long to feel understood. Some long to feel chosen. There is nothing wrong with these desires. The problem arises when someone learns to use them as leverage. Manipulative people rarely create needs. More often, they identify needs that already exist and position themselves as the answer. That is what makes the process so difficult to recognize. It feels natural. It feels good. It feels like exactly what you've been waiting for. And that is precisely why so many intelligent people miss the warning signs. The goal of this chapter is not to make you suspicious of affection. The goal is to help you recognize the difference between genuine connection and manufactured attachment. One grows steadily. The other arrives at full speed. One respects the passage of time. The other tries to outrun it. And eventually, no matter how carefully someone constructs a mask, maintaining it becomes exhausting. Sooner or later, cracks begin to appear. Small inconsistencies, unexpected reactions, moments when the person you've come to know briefly disappears, revealing something underneath. And those moments are often far more revealing than all the attention that came before. Before we move on, it's worth taking a moment to look at the bigger picture. So far, we've explored how manipulators think, how they identify potential targets, and how they gather the information they need to build trust. We've also looked at one of the most powerful tools they use in the early stages of a relationship: attention. Whether it appears in a friendship, a romantic relationship, or even a professional environment, excessive attention can create a powerful sense of connection. It can make people feel valued, understood, and important. That is why it can be so effective. At this point, many people assume the most important part of manipulation happens at the beginning. They focus on the questions that were asked, the compliments that were given, or the speed at which the relationship developed. Those details matter, but they are only part of the story. The truth is that many manipulative people are capable of creating an impressive first impression. They know how to appear charming, thoughtful, and trustworthy. Some are so skilled at presenting themselves that even experienced and intelligent people fail to notice anything unusual. The challenge comes later. Maintaining a carefully constructed image requires effort. It requires consistency. It requires a person to constantly manage what they say, how they behave, and how they are perceived by others. Eventually, that becomes difficult. No one can perfectly maintain a performance forever. Sooner or later, something slips. A reaction doesn't match the situation. A story changes. An unexpected emotion appears. The image that once seemed so convincing begins to show small cracks. What makes these moments important is that they are rarely dramatic. Most people expect a major revelation. They imagine catching someone in a lie or witnessing an obvious act of manipulation. In reality, the signs are often much smaller than that. They appear in everyday interactions and are easy to dismiss when viewed in isolation. Looking back, many people can remember moments when something felt slightly off. Perhaps a reaction seemed unusually intense. Perhaps a comment felt unnecessarily cruel. Perhaps a person's behavior suddenly seemed inconsistent with the image they had presented from the beginning. At the time, those moments often seem insignificant. Later, they make perfect sense. The reason is simple. Manipulators are rarely exposed by the qualities they carefully choose to show the world. More often, They are exposed by the moments when they stop paying attention, lose control, or reveal something they never intended others to see. And that is exactly what we're going to explore next. Because if you want to understand who someone truly is, you shouldn't focus only on the image they present. You should also pay attention to the moments when that image begins to crack. Chapter 4. The Mask Slips. Moments of revealing behavior most people miss. Ask people who have escaped a manipulative relationship what surprised them most, and many will give a similar answer. It wasn't that the warning signs were invisible. It was that they didn't understand what those signs meant until much later. When people look back on unhealthy relationships, friendships, or professional partnerships, they often remember moments that felt strange at the time. A comment that seemed unnecessarily harsh, a reaction that felt bigger than the situation required, a story that didn't quite match what they had heard before. Most of these moments are easy to dismiss when they happen. Life is messy. People have bad days. Everyone occasionally says something they regret or reacts poorly under pressure. Because of that, we tend to explain away behavior that makes us uncomfortable. The problem is that patterns rarely reveal themselves all at once. More often, they emerge gradually. To understand how this happens, consider the experience of a woman named Rachel. Rachel met her partner, Michael, through mutual friends. In the beginning, everything seemed effortless. He was attentive, thoughtful, and easy to talk to. Friends described him as charming. Her family liked him immediately. For nearly a year, Rachel felt fortunate to have found someone who appeared so supportive and emotionally mature. Looking back, she would later realize that the first warning sign appeared far earlier than she thought. The strange thing was that it seemed insignificant at the time. One evening, they were having dinner with friends when someone disagreed with Michael about a relatively minor topic. The disagreement was harmless and lasted less than a minute, but Rachel noticed a change in him. His smile disappeared. His tone became noticeably sharper. What should have been a casual conversation suddenly felt tense. The moment passed quickly. Nobody mentioned it. Michael returned to normal almost immediately. Rachel dismissed it as stress. Most people would have done the same. This is one reason sudden anger can be so revealing. The issue isn't that someone becomes angry. Every human being experiences anger. The issue is what triggers it and how quickly it appears. Many manipulative individuals work hard to project an image of confidence, patience, and emotional control. As long as situations unfold the way they want, maintaining that image is relatively easy. Problems often arise when they feel challenged, criticized, ignored, or denied something they believe they deserve. In those moments, the reaction can reveal something important. A person who appears calm and reasonable most of the time may become surprisingly hostile when their authority is questioned. Someone who seems confident may react poorly to even mild criticism. A simple disagreement can suddenly feel like a personal attack. What makes these moments confusing is that they often appear inconsistent with everything you've seen before. That inconsistency is exactly why they matter. As Rachel's relationship continued, she began noticing other inconsistencies. At first, they seemed small. Michael would tell a story about a previous job, and a few weeks later, some of the details would change. He would describe an argument with a former friend, then later tell the same story from a completely different perspective. Occasionally, he would express strong opinions about honesty and loyalty, while behaving in ways that seemed difficult to reconcile with those values. None of these contradictions felt serious enough to confront. Individually, they seemed harmless. Together, they painted a different picture. One of the most common mistakes people make is assuming that honesty and consistency are the same thing. They are not. People forget details. Memories change. Everyone occasionally tells a story differently. What matters is the pattern. When contradictions become frequent, they often suggest that someone is more concerned with managing their image than communicating the truth. The facts become flexible. The story changes depending on what is most useful in the moment. This is why paying attention to actions is often more valuable than paying attention to words. Words can be carefully selected. Behavior is much harder to manage over long periods of time. Several months later, Rachel noticed another shift. It began when she started spending more time with colleagues from work. She had recently received a promotion and was excited about new opportunities. At first, Michael appeared supportive. He congratulated her and encouraged her to pursue her goals. But over time, small comments began appearing. Whenever she mentioned a co-worker, he seemed irritated. Whenever she attended a work event, he asked unusually detailed questions about who would be there. When she talked about a professional achievement, his enthusiasm often felt forced. The comments themselves were subtle. Nothing he said sounded openly jealous. In fact, many of his concerns seemed reasonable on the surface. He would tell her he was only looking out for her. He would question whether certain people had good intentions. He would suggest that she was working too hard and neglecting more important things. Each comment sounded harmless on its own. Over time, however, they created a pattern. Rachel began finding herself justifying ordinary decisions. She felt guilty for attending events she once enjoyed. She started sharing less information because discussing certain topics always seemed to create tension. This is one of the reasons jealousy can be difficult to recognize. It rarely presents itself as outright possessiveness in the beginning. Instead, it often disguises itself as concern, disappointment, or criticism. The goal is not always to express insecurity. Sometimes the goal is to gradually limit another person's independence. Healthy people may occasionally feel jealous, but they recognize the emotion as their responsibility to manage. Manipulative individuals often expect other people to adjust their behavior in response to it. As time passed, another pattern emerged. Michael seemed to have strong opinions about nearly every aspect of Rachel's life. At first, she appreciated his advice. He was intelligent, confident, and often persuasive. Whenever she faced a difficult decision, he seemed eager to help. Eventually, however, the advice began feeling different. He questioned friendships he didn't approve of. He criticized decisions that didn't align with his preferences. He expected to be consulted about choices that had little to do with him. When Rachel disagreed, he often reacted with frustration. What once felt supportive now felt restrictive. One of the reasons controlling behavior is so difficult to identify is that it rarely begins with demands. If someone immediately tried to control every aspect of your life, the problem would be obvious. Instead, control tends to develop gradually. It enters the relationship disguised as guidance, concern, or expertise. By the time the pattern becomes clear, it has often become part of the relationship's normal routine. The final piece of the puzzle appeared during a family gathering. Rachel's younger brother was celebrating a major achievement. The entire family was excited for him, and much of the evening focused on his success. Michael seemed pleasant enough at first, but as the evening continued, his mood noticeably changed. He interrupted conversations. He redirected attention toward himself. He appeared irritated whenever someone else's accomplishments became the focus of discussion. Later that evening, he complained about feeling overlooked. For Rachel, this moment was unexpectedly revealing. It wasn't just that Michael wanted attention, it was the assumption that he deserved it. That assumption sits at the heart of entitlement. Entitled people often believe they deserve special consideration, special treatment, or special exceptions. They struggle when situations do not revolve around their needs. They view ordinary limits as unfair restrictions and often react poorly when they are treated the same as everyone else. Like the other warning signs we've discussed, Entitlement is not defined by a single incident. It becomes visible through repeated behavior, the expectation that other people should accommodate them, the belief that their needs should take priority, the frustration that appears when the world refuses to cooperate. Looking back, Rachel could identify dozens of moments that had seemed insignificant at the time. None of them felt important enough to end a relationship. None of them seemed dramatic enough to justify concern. That is precisely why they were easy to ignore. The reality is that most manipulative people do not reveal themselves through one shocking event. They reveal themselves through patterns that become visible over time. Small moments begin connecting to other small moments. Eventually, the image they worked so hard to create becomes difficult to maintain. And when that happens, people are often left wondering the same thing. If the warning signs were there all along, why didn't I leave? The question isn't why predators behave this way. The real question is why good people stay. Chapter 5. How predators use your empathy against you. At the end of the previous chapter, we arrived at an uncomfortable question. If the warning signs were there, why do so many good people stay? The answer is rarely as simple as fear, weakness, or denial. In fact, many people remain in manipulative relationships for reasons that initially seem admirable. They stay because they are loyal. They stay because they are compassionate. They stay because they genuinely care about the well-being of others. One of the most common misunderstandings about manipulation is the belief that predators target weakness. As we've already seen, that isn't necessarily true. More often, they target qualities that make healthy relationships possible in the first place. Empathy, patience, generosity, and understanding are all strengths. The problem begins when those strengths are used against the very people who possess them. To understand how this happens, let's return to a story. David met Claire at a time when both of them were rebuilding their lives after difficult relationships. From the beginning, Claire was open about her past. She spoke about former partners who had mistreated her, friends who had betrayed her, and family members who never seemed to understand her. David admired her honesty. He saw someone who had been through hardship and was trying to move forward. Like many empathetic people, his instinct was to help. At first, the relationship felt balanced. Claire was affectionate, attentive, and grateful for the support David offered. Whenever she talked about painful experiences, he listened. Whenever she felt anxious or overwhelmed, he reassured her. It felt natural. That's what people do when they care about someone. Over time, however, David noticed a pattern. No matter what problem Claire described, the story always seemed to end the same way. Someone had hurt her. Someone had failed her. Someone else was responsible. Whether she was talking about a former partner, a coworker, a friend, or a family member, she always appeared as the victim of someone else's actions. At first, David saw this as bad luck. After all, some people genuinely experience more hardship than others. But as the months passed, he began wondering why responsibility never seemed to flow in both directions. Claire could describe what other people had done wrong in extraordinary detail, yet she rarely reflected on her own role in conflicts. The question lingered in the back of his mind, but every time it surfaced, another part of him pushed it away. He reminded himself that everyone deserves compassion. He told himself that judging her would be unfair. That is often where manipulation gains its first foothold. Empathetic people tend to give others the benefit of the doubt. They search for explanations before drawing conclusions. When someone appears wounded, they instinctively focus on understanding the pain rather than examining the behavior. There's nothing wrong with that instinct. In healthy relationships, it is one of the qualities that allows people to support one another through difficult times. The problem arises when understanding turns into responsibility. As the relationship continued, Claire's emotional struggles began influencing more and more aspects of David's life. If he spent an evening with friends, she seemed hurt. If he worked late, she felt neglected. If he wanted time alone to recharge, she interpreted it as rejection. Rarely did she make direct demands. Instead, she described how his decisions made her feel. She talked about feeling abandoned, forgotten, or unimportant. The conversations often ended with David reassuring her, apologizing, or changing his plans. From the outside, none of this looked particularly alarming. In fact, many people would describe it as normal relationship conflict. The difference was that the pattern never changed. Gradually, David began organizing his life around avoiding Claire's disappointment. He declined invitations he wanted to accept. He abandoned hobbies he once enjoyed. He found himself constantly evaluating how his choices might affect her mood. Without realizing it, he had moved into a new role. He was no longer supporting her. He was managing her emotions. That distinction is important because it highlights one of the most common tools manipulators use: guilt. Guilt is incredibly effective because it works best on people who care about others. Someone who lacks empathy is difficult to guilt. Someone who values kindness, however, is much easier to influence. The more seriously a person takes their responsibilities toward others, the more vulnerable they often become to emotional pressure. Most manipulative guilt does not sound aggressive. It rarely arrives in the form of threats. Instead, it appears in ordinary conversations. "After everything I've done for you, I didn't think you'd make that choice. I guess I know where I stand now. You clearly care more about them than you do about me. I won't bother asking again." Statements like these are powerful because they shift the focus away from the original issue. Suddenly, the discussion is no longer about a boundary, a decision, or a disagreement. It becomes a conversation about guilt. The other person is no longer evaluating whether their choice was reasonable. They are trying to relieve the uncomfortable feeling that has been created. David experienced this repeatedly. Whenever he attempted to create space, the conversation somehow returned to Claire's pain. If he wanted a weekend to himself, she felt rejected. If he disagreed with her, she questioned whether he truly cared about her. If he expressed frustration, she reminded him how difficult her life had been. Eventually, he stopped raising concerns altogether. It simply felt easier. This is where many people become trapped. They confuse compassion with obligation. They begin believing that caring about someone's feelings means taking responsibility for those feelings. But those are not the same thing. You can understand someone's pain without becoming responsible for fixing it. You can empathize with someone's struggles without sacrificing your own well-being. You can care deeply about another person while still maintaining limits. Manipulators often blur these distinctions because doing so increases their influence. Another common tactic is emotional blackmail. Despite the dramatic name, emotional blackmail is often subtle enough to go unnoticed. It occurs whenever someone uses fear, guilt, or obligation to pressure another person into behaving a certain way. A parent might remind an adult child of every sacrifice they made while growing up whenever the child makes an independent decision. A friend may react to a reasonable boundary by suggesting the friendship clearly means more to one person than the other. A partner might imply that love should require constant access to your time, attention, and energy. The details vary, but the mechanism remains the same. The goal is not to solve a problem. The goal is to make another person feel responsible. That feeling of responsibility can be difficult to recognize because it often develops gradually. Few people wake up one morning and decide to carry someone else's emotional world on their shoulders. More often, the burden accumulates over months or years until it begins to feel normal. That was exactly what happened to David. The turning point came during a conversation with a therapist. After describing the relationship, he expected to hear advice about communication, patience, or compromise. Instead, The therapist asked a simple question. When was the last time Claire took responsibility for managing her own emotions? The question caught him off guard. For the first time, he realized how much energy he had spent trying to prevent her from feeling disappointed, anxious, lonely, or upset. Every decision had been filtered through the question of how Claire might react. Somewhere along the way, support had become responsibility, and responsibility had become control. That realization changed the way he viewed the relationship. He began understanding that empathy does not require self-sacrifice. In fact, healthy empathy depends on boundaries. Without them, compassion can slowly turn into exhaustion. This is one of the hardest lessons for kind people to learn because it feels uncomfortable at first. Setting boundaries can make others disappointed. It can create conflict. It can even trigger guilt. But guilt is not always evidence that you've done something wrong. Sometimes it is simply evidence that you are doing something differently. The goal is not to become less caring. It is not to stop helping people. It is not to approach every relationship with suspicion. The goal is to recognize that kindness and boundaries are not opposites. They are partners. One without the other eventually creates problems. Looking back, David realized that his empathy had never been the issue. The qualities that made him supportive, loyal, and compassionate were not flaws. What created the problem was the belief that caring about someone required unlimited access to his time, energy, and emotional resources. It didn't. And that may be the most important lesson in this entire chapter. Your kindness is not the problem. Your empathy is not the problem. Your willingness to care about other people is not the problem. The problem is believing that those qualities require you to abandon your own boundaries. They don't. Chapter 6. The Art of Quiet Boundaries. By now, we've spent several chapters examining how manipulation works. We've looked at how predators identify potential targets, how they build trust, how they gather information, and how they often use empathy to maintain influence over others. At some point, however, understanding the problem is no longer enough. The real question becomes, how do you protect yourself? Many people assume the answer involves becoming tougher or less trusting. They imagine that protecting themselves requires building emotional walls or learning how to spot every manipulative person before they get too close. In reality, the most effective form of protection is usually much quieter than that. It comes down to boundaries, not aggressive boundaries designed to punish people, not walls that keep everyone at a distance, simply clear limits that protect your time, your energy, and your emotional well-being. The interesting thing about boundaries is that they reveal far more about other people than they do about you. Healthy people may not always love your boundaries, but they generally respect them. Manipulative people often react very differently. They challenge them, negotiate them, or attempt to make you feel guilty for having them in the first place. This is why learning to set boundaries is one of the most valuable skills a person can develop. Take Sarah, for example. For most of her life, Sarah was known as the reliable one. Friends called her when they needed help. Co-workers relied on her during stressful projects. Family members knew she would step in whenever there was a problem. She took pride in being dependable and genuinely enjoyed helping the people she cared about. The problem was that she rarely stopped to consider whether she actually wanted to say yes. Helping had become automatic. If someone asked for a favor, she agreed. If someone needed her time, she rearranged her schedule. If someone had a problem, she felt responsible for solving it. For years, she viewed this as kindness. Eventually, she began recognizing the cost. She was constantly exhausted. Her own priorities were pushed aside. Resentment started creeping into relationships she once enjoyed. The strange thing was that nobody had forced her into this position. Most of the time, she had volunteered for it. The turning point came during a particularly stressful week at work. A friend called asking for help with a project that wasn't urgent and wasn't her responsibility. As usual, Sarah felt the familiar urge to agree. Then she paused. For the first time, she said something she almost never said. "I can't help with that this week." The conversation lasted less than a minute. Her friend understood. The friendship survived. Nothing terrible happened. That moment taught Sarah something important. Saying no was not an act of selfishness. It was simply an honest assessment of what she could realistically give. Many people struggle with boundaries because they assume every no requires a detailed explanation. They worry that declining a request will make them appear rude, uncaring, or selfish. As a result, they often spend more time defending their decisions than making them. Sarah used to do exactly that. Whenever she declined an invitation or a request, she immediately began explaining herself. She would describe her schedule, her responsibilities, her stress level, and every reason behind her decision. She hoped the explanation would prevent disappointment or disagreement. Instead, it often created new problems. The more information she provided, the more opportunities people had to challenge her decision. Someone would suggest an alternative. Another person would offer a solution to the scheduling problem. Before long, the discussion shifted from the original answer to a negotiation. Over time, Sarah learned a valuable lesson. People can debate your reasons. They cannot debate your decision. A simple response such as, "I won't be able to do that," is often far more effective than a lengthy explanation. Most healthy people accept the answer and move on. Those who refuse to accept it frequently reveal something important about themselves. Another lesson arrived unexpectedly. For years, Sarah believed every conflict could be solved through communication. If someone misunderstood her, she explained herself. If a disagreement emerged, she worked harder to find common ground. If a relationship became difficult, she invested more effort into fixing it. That approach worked well with reasonable people. It worked poorly with manipulative ones. One friendship in particular seemed trapped in the same cycle. Every few months, Sarah would explain a boundary. Her friend would agree. A few weeks later, the same issue would reappear. Another conversation followed. Another promise was made. Nothing changed. At first, Sarah assumed she simply hadn't explained herself clearly enough. Eventually, she realized the problem wasn't communication. The problem was respect. Some people do not ignore boundaries because they don't understand them. They ignore boundaries because they don't like them. That realization changed the way she approached certain relationships. Instead of repeatedly trying to convince people to respect her limits, she began paying attention to their actions. If someone consistently ignored her boundaries despite repeated conversations, she stopped investing the same amount of energy in the relationship. This is where another important skill comes into play: knowing when to walk away. Walking away does not always mean ending a relationship. Sometimes it means ending an argument. Sometimes it means leaving a conversation that is no longer productive. Sometimes it means recognizing that not every disagreement requires your participation. One of the most freeing lessons many people learn is that they do not have to attend every argument they are invited to. Manipulative individuals often thrive on endless discussions. They want to revisit the same issue repeatedly, challenge every boundary, and keep the conversation going until the other person becomes exhausted enough to give in. You are not obligated to participate in that process. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to step back. Not because you've lost the argument, because you've recognized it isn't leading anywhere useful. Around the same time, Sarah began paying closer attention to something she had spent years ignoring: her instincts. Like many people, she had a habit of talking herself out of uncomfortable feelings. Whenever something felt off, she searched for logical explanations. She worried about being unfair. She worried about judging people too quickly. Then she remembered a former business contact she had met several years earlier. There had been nothing obviously wrong with him. He was professional, charismatic, and well-spoken. Yet after every meeting, Sarah left feeling strangely uneasy. She couldn't explain why. Because she had no evidence, she ignored the feeling. Months later, she learned that several people had ended professional relationships with him after discovering repeated dishonesty and misleading behavior. The experience stayed with her, not because her instincts had magically predicted the future, but because she realized they had noticed details she hadn't consciously processed at the time. Instincts are not supernatural. They are often the result of subtle observations happening below conscious awareness. Your brain notices inconsistencies in behavior, tone, timing, and communication long before you can fully explain them. That doesn't mean every uncomfortable feeling is correct. It simply means those feelings deserve curiosity rather than immediate dismissal. The final lesson Sarah learned involved access. Many people think of trust as something that should be given freely until someone proves they don't deserve it. That approach often creates unnecessary vulnerability. A healthier perspective is to view trust as something that develops gradually. Not everyone needs immediate access to your personal struggles. Not everyone needs unrestricted access to your time. Not everyone deserves your confidence simply because they ask for it. Healthy relationships tend to deepen naturally over time. Trust grows through consistent behavior, mutual respect, and shared experiences. Manipulative people often try to accelerate that process because access gives them influence. Boundaries slow it down, and slowing things down is often one of the most effective forms of protection available. Looking back, Sarah realized that boundaries had changed far more than her relationships. They had changed the way she viewed herself. She no longer measured kindness by how much she sacrificed for others. She no longer felt responsible for solving every problem or meeting every expectation. Instead, she learned that healthy relationships require both generosity and limits. Without boundaries, kindness often turns into exhaustion. Without boundaries, trust becomes blind. Without boundaries, empathy can become self-neglect. The goal was never to become suspicious of everyone around her. It was to become more intentional about who received her time, energy, and trust. That distinction made all the difference. Because boundaries do not prevent healthy relationships. They make healthy relationships possible. Without them, trust is simply hope. With them, trust becomes a conscious choice. Chapter 7. How to Trust Again. After you've been deceived. When Rachel's relationship with Michael ended, she expected the hardest part to be over. For a while, she believed that once the argument stopped and the confusion disappeared, life would immediately return to normal. After all, the person who had caused so much stress was no longer part of her daily life. There would be no more second-guessing conversations, no more trying to make sense of contradictory behavior, and no more wondering whether she was overreacting or imagining things. What she didn't expect was how long the experience would continue affecting the way she saw herself. In the months that followed, Rachel spent a great deal of time replaying the relationship in her mind. She revisited conversations, remembered situations she had dismissed at the time, and found herself asking the same questions over and over again. How had she missed so many warning signs? Why had she ignored certain feelings? Why had she trusted someone who ultimately proved unworthy of that trust? The more she thought about those questions, the more she began doubting her own judgment. What had started as disappointment in another person slowly turned into disappointment in herself. This is one of the least discussed consequences of manipulation. People often assume the greatest damage comes from the betrayal itself. But many discover that the deeper wound is the loss of confidence in their own perceptions. After spending months or years being misled, pressured, or manipulated, they begin questioning their instincts. They wonder whether they can trust their own judgment. Some even become convinced that they are naturally poor judges of character. Rachel reached that point more than once. The problem was that she was looking at the past through the lens of information she didn't have at the time. Looking back, everything seemed obvious. The contradictions stood out. The moments of control felt unmistakable. The warning signs appeared larger than life. But hindsight has a way of creating certainty where none existed. The reality was that Rachel had made decisions based on the information available to her at the time. She hadn't knowingly trusted a manipulator. She had trusted someone who had spent months presenting himself as trustworthy. There is an important difference between those two things, and understanding that difference became one of the first steps in her recovery. Gradually, she stopped asking herself how she could have trusted Michael and began asking a more useful question. Why had she started treating trust itself as a mistake? The answer was uncomfortable. Part of her believed that if she had been more suspicious from the beginning, she could have avoided the pain that followed. If she had questioned more, trusted less, and kept her guard up, perhaps none of it would have happened. It is a conclusion many people reach after betrayal. Unfortunately, it often leads them in the wrong direction. Rather than developing healthier boundaries, they build emotional walls. They become cautious around everyone. Every new friendship is examined for hidden motives. Every disagreement feels like a potential warning sign. Every mistake becomes evidence that another betrayal may be coming. At first, this feels like self-protection. Over time, it becomes another kind of prison. Rachel noticed this happening in her own life. She found herself analyzing conversations that would have seemed completely normal a year earlier. She became skeptical of kindness and suspicious of compliments. Instead of evaluating people as individuals, she began viewing them through the lens of her previous experience. The strange thing was that Michael was no longer part of her life, yet he was still influencing the way she approached every new relationship. Recognizing that fact became a turning point. Healing did not begin when she stopped thinking about what had happened. Healing began when she decided that one person's behavior would not determine how she viewed everyone else. Several months later, she met someone through work. There was nothing dramatic about the introduction, no instant connection, no overwhelming attention, no feeling that she had met someone extraordinary after a single conversation. In fact, if someone had asked her to describe him after their first meeting, she probably would have struggled to say much at all. What happened instead was something far less exciting but far more important. Consistency. When he said he would do something, he did it. When plans were made, they happened. Conversations remained conversations. Disagreements remained disagreements. There were no sudden emotional swings, no attempts to create guilt, and no pressure to move the relationship faster than felt comfortable. At first, Rachel almost found this unsettling. After everything she had experienced, part of her had become accustomed to emotional intensity. She had spent so much time trying to understand Michael's behavior that uncertainty had started to feel normal. The absence of confusion felt unfamiliar. Weeks passed, and she kept waiting for something to change. She expected a contradiction, a manipulation, a hidden agenda, some sign that the calmness was temporary. But it never came. For the first time in years, she wasn't spending her energy trying to figure someone out. She wasn't analyzing every text message or searching for hidden meaning behind ordinary interactions. The relationship required attention, but it didn't require constant investigation. That experience taught her something she hadn't fully understood before. Healthy relationships are often much quieter than unhealthy ones. They are not built on emotional highs and lows. They do not require constant reassurance or endless conflict resolution. They are not driven by confusion, uncertainty, or the need to continually prove your value to another person. Instead, they tend to feel stable, not perfect, not exciting every moment of every day. Stable. For a long time, Rachel had mistaken intensity for connection. Many people do. They assume that strong emotions automatically indicate a deep relationship. In reality, emotional intensity and emotional health are not the same thing. One can exist without the other. As Rachel continued moving forward, she also began rebuilding trust in herself. This process looked different than she expected. She had assumed confidence meant becoming an expert at reading people. She thought healing would involve learning how to identify every manipulative person before they could cause harm. Eventually, she realized that confidence had very little to do with certainty. Confident people are not people who never make mistakes. They are not people who accurately predict every problem before it happens. They are people who trust themselves to respond appropriately when problems arise. That distinction changed everything. Rachel no longer felt pressure to perfectly judge every person she met. Instead, she focused on something much simpler. She paid attention to her experiences. When something felt wrong, she took the feeling seriously instead of immediately explaining it away. When someone's actions consistently contradicted their words, she noticed. When a boundary was ignored, she treated it as useful information rather than a misunderstanding that needed endless discussion. Over time, she discovered that trusting herself was not about becoming suspicious. It was about becoming attentive. The same was true when it came to recognizing healthy people. Many discussions about manipulation focus heavily on red flags. While those warning signs are important, recovery also requires learning to recognize what healthy behavior looks like. Healthy people respect boundaries even when they don't particularly like them. Healthy people can apologize without turning themselves into victims. Healthy people accept responsibility for mistakes. They do not require constant access to your time, attention, or emotional energy in order to feel secure. Most importantly, healthy people are generally consistent. You may not agree with them all the time. They may disappoint you occasionally. They may have flaws, bad habits, and difficult moments. But you know who they are. You are not constantly trying to solve them. That realization helped Rachel more than any piece of advice she had received. The goal was never to become perfect at identifying manipulation. The goal was to become comfortable trusting herself again. The process took time. Some days were easier than others. There were moments when old doubts resurfaced and moments when fear still influenced her decisions. But gradually, the experience began losing its power over her. The relationship that once felt like evidence of poor judgment became something else entirely. It became a lesson. Not a lesson about becoming cold or suspicious, but a lesson about boundaries, self-respect, and awareness. Most people who recover from deception eventually reach a similar conclusion. The experience changes them, but not always in the way they expect. It teaches them to slow down, to pay attention, to trust actions more than promises, to recognize that kindness and self-protection can exist together. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds them that trust was never the enemy. Trust is what allows friendships, families, partnerships, and communities to exist. The answer is not to eliminate trust from your life. The answer is to pair trust with awareness, patience, and healthy boundaries. The world will always contain manipulative people. It will also contain honest people, loyal people, and genuinely good people. Learning to tell the difference is one of the most valuable skills a person can develop. That skill does not come from fear, it comes from experience. And once you learn to trust yourself again, deception loses much of its power. not because it becomes impossible, but because you know you are capable of recognizing it, responding to it, and moving forward without losing yourself in the process. One final truth: why they don't get to decide who you become. As we reach the end of this audiobook, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. If you think back to everything we've discussed, from the first warning signs of manipulation to the process of rebuilding trust after betrayal, there is one lesson that sits at the center of it all. The goal was never to fear everyone. The goal was to see clearly. It's easy to finish a book like this and start looking at the world differently. You may find yourself thinking about people you've known, relationships you've experienced, or situations that suddenly make more sense than they did before. That kind of reflection is valuable. Awareness often begins with looking back and recognizing patterns we couldn't see at the time. But awareness should not lead to fear. The purpose of understanding manipulation is not to become suspicious of everyone you meet. It is not to convince yourself that every act of kindness hides an agenda, or that every new relationship should be approached with distrust. The real purpose is to help you make better decisions, to trust your instincts when something feels wrong, to pay attention when actions consistently fail to match words, to recognize when empathy is being used against you, and perhaps most importantly, to understand that protecting yourself does not require becoming someone you are not. Throughout this audiobook, we've talked a lot about predators, manipulation, and unhealthy behavior. But if you think about Rachel's journey, the most important lesson wasn't really about Michael at all. At the beginning, she believed the answer was learning how to spot every manipulator before they got close. Like many people who have been hurt, she thought safety came from becoming more suspicious, more guarded, and more cautious. What she eventually discovered was something much more valuable. She learned how to trust herself again. She learned that boundaries were not walls. She learned that kindness and self-respect could exist at the same time. She learned that healthy relationships don't require constant analysis, confusion, or emotional exhaustion. Most importantly, she learned that one person's choices did not have to define the rest of her life. That lesson applies to all of us. The people who deceive us leave an impact, but they do not get to decide who we become afterward. That part belongs to us. The world will always contain difficult people. It will also contain honest people, loyal friends, supportive partners, and relationships that bring stability instead of chaos. Learning to recognize the difference is one of the most valuable skills you can develop, and it's a skill that grows stronger with experience. If this audiobook helped you see a situation, a relationship, or even yourself a little more clearly, I'd love to have you join me for the next one. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future audiobooks and deep dives into psychology, human behavior, self-development, and the hidden dynamics that shape our everyday lives. And speaking of what's next, our next audiobook explores a different side of influence. This time, we're moving beyond manipulation and looking at persuasion. Why do some people naturally command attention the moment they enter a room? Why do certain individuals earn trust quickly while others struggle to be heard? And what separates healthy influence from manipulation? We'll explore the psychology behind confidence, communication, persuasion, and personal presence, giving you practical insights you can use in your own life while helping you better understand the people around you. Until then, thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of yourself, stay aware, trust your judgment, and remember, the goal was never to walk through life afraid of what might be hiding beneath the surface. The goal was simply to see clearly enough that you no longer have to wonder.